Celebs, they're just like us. Sometimes they accidentally kill people, but unlike the regular folks, they manage to walk away without consequences much more often. Caitlyn Jenner.
What do you remember about the accident?
Very little. I remember it happening, and that's about it.
Caitlyn Jenner, a former Olympic gold medalist and reality TV star, found herself at the center of a tragic car accident that claimed the life of another driver. On February 7, 2015, Jenner was driving her SUV along the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, California, when she became involved in a multi-car accident. According to investigators, Jenner's vehicle collided with a car driven by 69-year-old Kim Ho, causing the Lexus to move into oncoming traffic. Tragically, Ho's car was then struck by a truck, resulting in her death. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department determined that the speed Jenner was going at was considered unsafe due to the wet and slippery conditions that day. But despite the initial investigation, Jenner was not charged with any crime. The authorities decided there was not enough evidence to prove her actions amounted to criminal negligence. Caitlyn Jenner expressed her sorrow and condolences to the victim's family.
Something like this, a tragedy like this, you'll never get over it. You just learn to live with it the best you possibly can.
Several civil lawsuits were filed against her in relation to the accident, but they were eventually settled out of court for undisclosed amounts.
You could spend a year in a county jail. Have you been able to even think about that?
The media wants that picture, don't they?
Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg, a legendary rapper known for his smooth rhymes and laid-back persona, faced a serious legal battle in the early years of his career.
And although details are very sketchy, we do know that one of the shooting victims is rapper Snoop Doggy Dogg.
In August 1993, just as Snoop Dogg's debut album, Doggy Style, was about to be released, he and his bodyguard, McKinley Lee, got involved in a fatal shooting. It resulted in the death of a rival gang member, Philip Waldemariam. Snoop Dogg, whose real name is Calvin Broderick, was charged with murder. The prosecution argued that he had been driving the vehicle while his bodyguard fired a shotgun. The following trial was highly publicized and became one of the most closely watched cases of its time. The defense claimed that Waldemariam had been armed and posed a genuine threat to the rapper, asserting that the shooting was an act of self-defense. Luckily for Snoop, the trial ended in 1996 when the jury took his side and acquitted him and his bodyguard of all charges.
We, the jury in above entitled action, find the defendant, Calvin Broderick, not guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
The trial and its aftermath had significant impact on Snoop Dogg's life and career. In the years that followed, he continued to create music and eventually became the global icon we know him as.
And I'm just advising young brothers and sisters and whoever that's paying attention to what I'm stressing, that ain't the place to be.
Venus Williams.
There are really no words to describe how devastating and...
On June 9, 2017, the legendary tennis star was driving through Palm Beach Gardens when she entered an intersection. Her SUV collided with a car driven by Linda Barson. Linda's husband, 78-year-old Jerome, was riding in the passenger seat. Jerome sustained severe injuries and passed away 2 weeks later. Due to Venus's star status, the accident garnered significant media attention. Initially, police found Venus at fault, stating she had violated the Barsons' right-of-way. This claim was based on witness statements. However, further investigation painted a different picture. Surveillance footage from nearby security cameras showed Venus entered the intersection legally on a green light. While crossing, she had to slow down to avoid hitting a car that made an illegal turn. Meanwhile, the light turned red and the Barsons' car collided with Venus. Based on this new evidence, the Palm Beach police reversed their initial statement that Venus was at fault. No charges were filed against the tennis star. Still, the Barson family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against her. It was settled out of court in 2018 with the terms remaining confidential. The family accepted Venus was not to blame and filed another lawsuit against Palm Beach County. They claim the intersection where the accident occurred is hazardous and that if the lanes were properly marked, the accident could have been avoided. Laura Bush. Before she was First Lady of the United States, Laura Bush became involved in a horrifying accident that haunted her for years. It happened on November 6, 1963. Laura Bush, then known as Laura Welch, was a 17-year-old high schooler living in Midland, Texas. She was driving her Chevrolet sedan with a friend when she failed to stop at a stop sign. As a result, she hit Michael Dutton Douglas, her close friend and classmate. Tragically, Michael sustained fatal injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. Laura and her passenger only suffered minor injuries. Following the accident, local authorities conducted an investigation and determined that Laura was at fault for failing to yield the right-of-way. However, no criminal charges were filed against her, as the accident was deemed a tragic mistake rather than a result of criminal negligence. She was racked by guilt for years after the crash, especially after not attending the funeral and not reaching out to the parents of the dead teenager. Over time, Laura opened up about the profound impact the accident had on her life, expressing her deep sorrow and regret for the loss of her friend.
In my mind, I prayed the whole time. I wrote this in the book, please God, please God, please God. Then I did what I think maybe people did then in West Texas, which is really sort of never talked about it again.
Phill Lewis. Phill Lewis is widely recognized for his role as Mr. Mosby on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. However, few people are aware of the serious crime he committed in the early 90s. What? When Lewis was 23 years old, he got involved in a car accident in Bethesda, Maryland. After a night of drinking, he decided to get behind the wheel. He drove his car at a high speed and ended up colliding with another vehicle. The accident resulted in the death of 21-year-old Isabel Duarte. Isabel had just moved to the United States from Portugal 3 years earlier and worked as a nanny. When police arrived at the scene, Lewis was found to have a blood alcohol level of 0.029, 3 times the legal limit. Supposedly, he would have had to consume 16 or 17 drinks to attain that level. He was charged with manslaughter by automobile and driving under the influence. Initially, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but the judge reduced it to 1 year. Lewis served his time at the Montgomery County Detention Center in Rockville, Maryland. After being released from prison, he focused on resuming his acting career, but the incident left a stain on his reputation. It took him several years to rebuild his professional image.
If you are driving, hopefully you'll know what the Prindle is.
Matthew Broderick.
I was in shock because I was the only living witness and Matthew was unconscious and had amnesia.
Broderick is best known for his roles in Ferris Bueller's Day Off and The Lion King. In 1987, while vacationing in Northern Ireland with his girlfriend, actress Jennifer Grey, Broderick was involved in a fatal car accident. The couple was driving in a rented BMW when Broderick unexpectedly switched into the wrong lane and collided head-on with an oncoming car. The crash resulted in the immediate death of Anna Gallagher, 28, and her mother, Margaret Doherty, 63. Broderick suffered a fractured leg and ribs, a concussion and a collapsed lung, while Grey sustained minor injuries. The real tragedy was, of course, the untimely death of the 2 women in the other car. Authorities charged Broderick with causing death by dangerous driving, a crime that could have led to a prison sentence of up to 5 years. However, due to a lack of evidence, the charges were later downgraded to careless driving. Broderick, who claimed to have no recollection of the accident, pled guilty and was fined to a total of £100, approximately $175. The incident and the resulting penalty led to public outcry since many people felt that the punishment did not fit the crime. I paid more than that in a parking ticket. Phil Spector.
The defendant, Philip Spector, guilty of the crime of second-degree murder.
Spector was a groundbreaking music producer known for his work with famous acts including the Beatles and Leonard Cohen, but his legacy will always be tainted by the heinous crime he committed. In 2003, actress Lana Clarkson was found dead in Spector's mansion in Alhambra, California. Clarkson, a 40-year-old actress who had appeared in various B-movies, was working as a hostess at the House of Blues in Hollywood. One night, she was seen leaving with Spector and was later found in his mansion's foyer with a gunshot wound to her mouth. Jesus. The initial call to 911 from Spector's house quoted him as saying, "I think I've killed someone."
I'm sorry there's a dead woman here, but I'm sorry, but this happened.
He later claimed that Clarkson's death was an accidental suicide and that she had kissed the gun.
It could have happened in anybody's house.
However, the forensic evidence, including blood spatter patterns, contradicted his statement and suggested that Clarkson had not shot herself. Spector was found guilty of second-degree murder in 2009. During the trial, 5 women testified that they had experienced Spector's violent behavior while holding a gun.
I was there, I saw it. He shot the thermostat off the wall.
I found myself in a prison. I couldn't get out.
Spector was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison for the murder of Lana Clarkson. This shocking crime brought an end to the career of one of the music industry's most influential figures. Spector remained in prison until his death in January 2021. Brandy Norwood. Brandy, the R&B pop sensation and star of 90s sitcom Moesha, became a vehicular manslaughter suspect in one fatal incident.
I don't like to think about it because I don't think that's something I could ever get over.
On December 30th, 2006, Brandy was driving her Land Rover on the 405 freeway in Los Angeles when she failed to notice the traffic in front of her was slowing down. Unable to stop in time, she rear-ended the Toyota driven by Awatef Abudihaj. The impact caused a chain reaction of collisions involving multiple vehicles. Sadly, Abudihaj succumbed to her injuries the following day. She was 38 years old and a mother of 2. Her sons, aged 10 and 14 at the time, were also in the car but luckily survived. An investigation by the California Highway Patrol determined that Brandy was at fault for the accident. They said she failed to maintain a safe following distance. But despite this finding, no criminal charges were filed against her. There was not enough evidence to prove her actions were more than a simple accident. Brandy was hit with several civil lawsuits filed by the victims' families and other parties involved in the accident. These lawsuits were eventually settled out of court for undisclosed amounts.
When he sees Brandy out there partying, dancing, drinking, living life, enjoying life, there's been absolutely no net ramifications on her at this point.
Brandy was left in a dark place following the tragedy and has since opened up in interviews about how the only thing keeping her going was her daughter.
But that was one of the worst times in my life.
Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, a renowned actor known for his work in Beetlejuice and The Boss Baby, as well as being Hailey Bieber's uncle, found himself in the center of unimaginable tragedy. On October 21st, 2021, Baldwin was on the set of the film Rust in Santa Fe, New Mexico. During a rehearsal, he was handed a prop gun. He had been told that the gun was cold, meaning it was safe and contained no live rounds. Tragically, when Baldwin used the weapon, it fired a bullet and hit cinematographer Helena Hutchins. She died from her wounds later that day. Director Joel Souza was injured, but luckily was able to survive. An investigation into the incident revealed lapses in safety protocols and issues with the handling and storage of firearms on the set.
I take the gun out slowly, I cock the pistol, bang, it goes up, she hits the ground, she goes down. And then he starts screaming.
Multiple lawsuits have been filed against the film's producers, including Baldwin. In 2023, he was criminally charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, to which he pleaded not guilty.
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
If found guilty, he could be sentenced to 5 years in prison. If you ever find yourself needing to get away with murder, it sure is handy to be rich and famous.